Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. January 30th, 2015. So glad you're here early, bright and early in the morning. It's 6 minutes past 6 o'clock a.m. Little bit warmer this morning. We have had a pretty good run of cold weather there, and 14 this morning in Anchorage, which is nice. 12 in Wasilla. It was -9 this time yesterday in Wasilla. Palmer 10. Eagle River 12, Girdwood snowing and 21 degrees. So good for the Girdwoodians getting some snow down there. Well, it's Friday. How about that? Welcome to the Friday edition of the Dan Fagan Radio Show. We're broadcasting to you this morning on KOAN 95.1 FM, 1080 AM. We're also on KVNT out in the Matanuska Valley, 92.5 FM, 1020 AM, and, or as they say in Britain, we are streaming on danfagan.us, both video and audio. That's the worldwide interweb, and you can see us there on your computer, smartphone, or whatever device you use to access the internet. We also archive the shows there, so you go to danfagan.us, click the links, follow the links, and you'll find us. Our telephone, let me give you the email address first. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. That's the that's where you get us on the interweb if you want to send an email. If you have an email machine. Our phone number, 569-1080. 569-1080. Call us up. Let us know what's happening, what's shaking, what's going on. So glad to have you here. Lots to get to today. So much to get to. A lot of good guests lined up. We're gonna have fun today. The big story there's a couple of big stories going on. Huge, a couple of really major stories. And I'll tell you, folks, I sent Alice Rogoff a note today. Alice Rogoff, who is the publisher of the Alaska Dispatch Daily News or whatever it's called, she will not call me back or respond to me. And I understand that, in her world, I'm probably just a little pesky gnat on the wall, and I don't know. But I can't get her to respond to me. And I started to reach out to her because it seemed so clear to me that she was so favoring Mr. Walker in the governor's race by printing literally one story and maybe one or two editorials a day about how Sean Parnell does not care if women are raped. And it was just the single most one-sided display of journalism I've personally ever seen. And you're talking about a guy who's worked in journalism his whole life. So I started to reach out to her to just ask her about it. What's going on here? This just seems so one-sided to me. She wouldn't respond. And I've just sensed that this newspaper, the Alaska Dispatch Daily News, or whatever it's called, they really love Bill Walker. That's fine. I like Bill Walker, too. I think he's a good man. But it's their job to cover him and to hold him accountable. That's their job. So there's this really big deal that's going on now with this Walker wanting to buy this gas utility. And the majority members of the House, they wrote a hugely strong press release early yesterday afternoon asking some major questions of Mr. Walker using the, ADA, which is this quasi-government agency, to buy a Fairbanks gas utility. And they raise a lot of questions. It's a huge story, especially in light of Mr. Walker coming to the table as governor as a guy who favors the Norway model, which is government should control everything. He clearly has surrounded himself with avowed socialists. And, that's what the owner state's about. The owner state is socialism. It's the government controlling the means of production. So Walker comes to the table with this predisposition. And there were a couple of private sector companies wanting to buy this Fairbanks utility, and Walker jumps in front of them and has the state buy it, not giving the private sector a chance. That's a huge story. When you got a guy who was disposed to having government over private sector jump in and thwart two private sector companies from purchasing a utility. And the Republicans in the House yesterday write this very strongly worded press release asking some serious questions about the move. And it's nowhere to be found in the paper today. Now, folks, that's a really big omission for a media outlet. So I sent a note to Ms. Rogoff, and I'm trying to be kind, and I'll just read to you what I wrote her this morning. I said, "Hi, Alice. I hope you don't mind me contacting you via Facebook." She doesn't return my calls or emails, so I'm just trying Facebook. She hasn't unfriended me yet. I will stop if it bothers you. Did you read the unusually strong press release issued by the House majority early yesterday afternoon? It questions the governor's gas utility purchase. It seems like a huge story to me with a lot of unanswered questions. With all due respect, I was wondering why it was not covered in this morning's paper. Now, that's the note I sent her. I've sent her many others, and I'm assuming she won't respond to this one either. But it's just such a clear indication in my mind. And it may be unfair that I'm targeting Alice Rogoff because I never has a journalist ever been more dedicated to being one-sided than Tony Hopfinger. When Tony Hopfinger went after Joe Miller, he basically said, "Look, I'm a journalist who doesn't care about being fair." He showed his colors there. So this could be Hopfinger driven. It could be that Hopfinger absolutely adores Walker too. I don't know. But we know Rogoff has a past of cozying up to Walker. One of her right-hand men or women, Margie Johnson, just adores Walker. Her Facebook page is littered with her and Walker pictures. So we know there's a coziness there. And maybe it's unfair to single out Rogoff. Maybe it's Hopfinger who's driving this. I don't know. But what is without dispute is that this is a newspaper that adores our governor and does not seem to be interested in questioning him, even when he thwarts two private sector companies and purchases this utility right before these two companies were ready to move in and do so. It's a big story, and it should be covered, and I want to know why it wasn't. And I think that's a fair question. I'm being respectful. I'm just simply asking why. And we'll see. I'll let you know if she responds. If she doesn't, I'll let you know that too. But we'll continue. We're going to line up some of these legislators. I've already invited some of them on today to see if they'll respond to this move by Governor Walker. And of course, we'd love to have the governor or any of his people explain to us what this is all about. 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number if you'd like to reach us. We are streaming live, danfagan.us, danfagan.us. The time currently 6:14. You are listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. 6:17 in the morning, Dan Fagan Show. Good morning to you. Glad you're here. Hope things are going well for you this morning. 14 degrees outside in Anchorage. Not too bad in light of the previous temperatures. Another big story today, the wind Fire Island deal. You've heard about this. Let me just give you the gist of my understanding of it. Siri, Native Corporation, got a bunch of government cash to build these windmills. That's the only reason people ever build windmills, is if the government takes a bunch of taxpayer money and gives it to the companies employing the alternative energy, because no one would ever do it because it doesn't pen it out. It doesn't pencil out. It's not profitable. So the government, which is under the spell of the cult, which is global warming, climate change, whatever it's called, they're promoting the idea of alternative energy, even if the free market is not going to embrace it because it does not pencil out. So we've got these windmills, and Siri bought into it. Why not? They get a bunch of taxpayer money to build them. And, that's the way it goes. Chugach Electric, which at the time decided to buy the windmills, the board was predominantly leftist. So the board, which leaned left, also are members of the global warming cult, climate change cult. And so they said, yes, we will buy power from Siri, or we will be involved in this wind power stuff, even though isn't the most best use of our dollars, but we get taxpayer money. So yeah, we're in on it too. And of course, the Chugach Electric ratepayers are the ones paying more as a result of electing global warming, climate change cult members to their board. So that's the history. So Siri decides, well, there's another $15 million of taxpayer money available, money that people worked very hard to earn, that the government will give us if we build more windmills. This is under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, one of Obama's stimulus deals. So Siri says, well, let's start building construction on roads to new turbines, because we'll get 15 million of other people's money to do it. So Siri starts building these roads. And what do you know? When it comes time to building the turbines, which they've already spent 15 million of your money on the roads to the turbines, nobody wants it. Nobody wants the power. Here's the headline in Alaska Dispatch News: with no buyers for power, Fire Island Wind delays adding turbines. Now, why is it that nobody wants it? Well, Golden Valley Electric Association, they did the math, and if they bought the power from the windmills, it would be double what they're charging their customers now. Fortunately, the Alaska Golden Valley Electric Association is not under the spell of the global warming climate change cult and willing to screw their customers as a result, unlike Chugach. Now, this is a pretty good story. I'm very pleased that reporter Susanna Caldwell did the story, first of all, and she asked some pretty good questions, but there are some questions that she did not ask in the story. And I wrote this on the comment section, that there are 3 questions for reporter Suzanne Caldwell and why she did not ask these questions. Question number 1, why not ask Siri officials why they started work on phase 2, even though they had no customers? Was it just so they could qualify for the $15 million of other people's hard-earned taxpayer money? Isn't this the very definition of waste? That's $15 million spent on a project that most likely will never be complete. So that would be the first question I would have Susanna Caldwell make Siri officials ask. Why would you spend $15 million on a project that you have no customers for? Was it just because it was so-called free money from the government and you didn't care if it was wasted? Now that's a reporter asking a legitimate question, not asking this story. Question number 2. If new customers of the turbines and the windmill power would pay double, how much more have current Chugach electric customers been paying? Once again, nope, nothing in the story about that. That's a huge component of this story, and it should be reported. Question number 3. If Siri wasted $15 million on the beginning of phase 2, how much taxpayer money has been spent on this project to date? Once again, nothing in there. See, this is the difference between the left-wing media and someone who's not under the spell of the global warming climate change cult. Because those facts are so important to this story, but they would reveal the foolishness of the global warming climate change cult if they were presented in the story. And it's so many times, ladies and gentlemen, the questions that are not asked that reveals how biased the media is. It's the omission of information. And we'll see. We'll see if Susanna Caldwell responds to my 3 questions or if she does a follow-up story and presents that information within the inside of this story. It's frankly astonishing that we've spent so much money in this country promoting alternative energy, and we've done it at the cost of taxpayers giving up their money for something that's not embraced by the free market. Now, let's take the $15 million Siri wasted on building a road to turbines that will never be built. Every dollar of that $15 million, someone, somewhere, at some point, left their family in the morning, went to a workplace, earned that money, and paid their taxes. Every dollar of that $15 million. So you go, you work hard, you play by the rules, you do what you're supposed to do, you write your check to Uncle Sam, or you have your money taken out of your paycheck, and the government says, here, Siri, here's $15 million. Build roads to turbines that will never be built, that nobody wants energy from. That $15 million is gone. Poof. Now you know what I mean when I say government, a place where a dollar goes to die. That $15 million no longer exists, ladies and gentlemen. Now, that wasting of that $15 million, that story is repeated hundreds of thousands of times across the country when it comes to government. Now let's think about this for a minute. That $15 million, which is gone, Siri just wasted it. Boom, poof, just some road to nowhere. What if that $15 million would have been invested into the private sector, where there's a bottom line mentality, where labor unions don't prevent people from being fired, where incompetency and waste is discouraged? What would have happened if that $15 million to build roads to turbines that will never be built? What would have happened with that $15 million? It would have produced so much opportunity and jobs for families. It would have been capital in the hands of savvy investors who know how to create value. It's night and day. And this is why the left sucks the life out of the economy, because it wants to funnel everything through government that just spills $15 million everywhere and doesn't care about it. Whereas the right wants everything to go through the private sector. It's a perfect example of the difference in the two philosophies. So now we have these roads on Fire Island that go to turbines that'll never be built. Unless here's the thing. If we get another Democratic president in there, who knows? They may say, "Well, we'll give you another 100 million and go ahead and build the turbines. And if nobody wants the power, we'll give you, we'll subsidize the power to the utility." If you're gonna keep propping up these alternative energies that don't really work or produce any kind of value, you can go as far as you want. And I'm surprised the Daily Dispatch, Anchorage Daily News, whatever it's called, actually did the story in the first place. I give them credit for that. With no buyers for power, Fire Island wind delays adding turbines. I think that's great that they'd even do that story. Frankly, it surprises me. But they've got to answer the three questions. Siri should be held accountable. Wasting $15 million of taxpayer money with no customers? Well, we'll build it and hope they come. It's not our money. It's not our shareholders' money. What do we care? And how much more have Chugach Electric customers paid for this electricity when future customers we're going to have to pay double? And how much taxpayer money has been wasted on these windmills to date? Come on now. Come on, Susanna Caldwell with the Alaska Dispatch Daily News, whatever it's called. Let's get some answers. Let's do your job. Do your job. Do your job. Don't promote your agenda. Do your job. Yeah, she may do it. I'm not gonna pass judgment. She very well may come through and get those three questions answered. 629, Dan Fagan. We have somebody on the line all the time? No, I didn't. Could you tell him I'll get to him in a second, or at the end of the break to hold on, not go anywhere? That David Boyle. Yeah, just so you know, I will always go to a call within 20 seconds of them being on the line. So if you ever see me like talking, if I don't, what I may do is, I see the calls back up. I'm going to get to you in a second, but I'll always acknowledge the callers within 25 seconds. And we should have. Well, normally it's my fault. I should log on, but I should have a light too. I'll talk to JR about that. Do you have a light, or do you just go by the screen? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, but you should have a big. KFQD. We had a big flashing light in each studio. Yeah. Well, that he should install a regular light for both of us. So here's a guy talking about danfagan.us. Neither method is working on my iPhone right now. Assuming it works on my laptop later, will the audio of today's show play even after the show itself is over at real time? I've never even gone to danfagan.us on my phone. I wonder if wonder if she's got that programmed right. Is it working now? Would you agree with this statement? It's better to not have streaming than streaming works 40% of the time. Yeah. Yeah. .35, Dan Fagan Show. Broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. Streaming live, danfagan.us. Good morning to you. A couple of big stories today that we're following. Bill Walker, our governor, buying a Fairbanks utility when two private sector companies wanted to buy it. We're going to try to get some answers on that. Just doesn't seem right. Doesn't make much sense to me. We're hopefully going to get Representative Hawker on today. He's got some serious questions about this, as do I. And of course, the Daily News hasn't touched it or the Dispatch hasn't touched it because they adore Mr. Walker. The other big story is the Fire Island wind turbines. The Siri got $15 million of taxpayer money and built a road to some new turbines, but they've discovered that nobody wants the new power. So I would say that 15 million is wasted. And there are a lot of questions about that were not covered in the Dispatch this morning, and we'd like some answers to. 569-1080 if you'd like to weigh in. 569-1080. David.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm great, David. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Just got to work. I have a few facts you might want to know on the original Fire Island wind farm.
Please, tell us.
Well, we did some investigating back then when it was announced that they were going to get the stimulus money.
Yep.
And they got $43 million.
Wow.
Of federal taxpayer dollars.
Wow.
To originally build those, 11 windmills?
Yeah.
Those windmills are General Electric, which is another crony capitalist company.
Right.
They were built in China.
Wow.
Using our taxpayer dollars. The other thing is the infrastructure to get that energy from Fire Island to, let's say, the mainland here was put in by Chugach Electric and paid for by Chugach Electric ratepayers.
And this is when the board was dominated by the IBEW union leftists.
Well, it's been dominated by them for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
Ever since Ray Craig and Rebecca Logan, those folks got off of the board. But so the other interesting thing about that electrical line that's been put into Fire Island is that can transmit energy both ways.
Okay.
So if the wind farm, let's say, fails, SERI has the infrastructure to be able to electrify that Fire Island.
Okay. And what's the significance of that?
Well, the significance is that the Chugach ratepayers have paid for the infrastructure for the SERI Fire Island landmass.
Interesting.
So they could do what they wanted over there. Now,
wow.
if the wind farm failed.
Wow.
Now, there is another piece of this puzzle called the wind production tax credit, which is a federal subsidy or a taxpayer subsidy. Right now, that is currently trying to be renewed in the Senate, U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Senator Grassley is the lead on that.
Okay.
From Iowa. But it's been defeated and pushed back, so it may not happen again. I think.
Well, let me. I want to, before we get into that, I want to zero back in on the SERI wind farm. So initially, taxpayer money that went to this project was how much? Did you say?
$43 million of stimulus money.
$43 million initial taxpayer investment.
Correct.
And then this new $15 million to build these roads to the turbines that will probably never be built. That brings it what, 58 million total?
Yes.
Is there any other money that we don't know about?
Well, you have the production tax credit.
And how much was that?
I think it's around 20%, but I'm not positive.
20% tax credit for
SERI would be receiving.
But does SERI pay taxes?
They probably do for this project. They're a corporation.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm not sure about that, but if they did, they get that big tax credit from the federal government.
Now,
that's the only reason that wind energy is economically feasible.
Sure. Do you know, because according to the utility that was looking at purchasing the new power, Golden Valley Electric, they said it penciled out at almost twice what it would cost if they didn't go with wind power. Do we know how much more Chugach customers are paying for SERI wind power, for these wind power, than they would if it was some other type of power?
That's on your monthly bill you get from Chugach Electric, and I don't have it in front of me, but 2.5% sounds like a surcharge for wind power.
Yeah, but that doesn't really answer the question. The question would be, just use generic numbers here that have no meaning. If it's 50 cents per kilowatt if I use this type of power, and it's $1 per kilowatt if I use wind power, that's what I'm looking for.
Well, I think in Chugach, just off the top of my head, not having the bill in front of me, it's around 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
Now Golden Valley, if you're in Fairbanks and getting your electricity from Golden Valley, you're paying 23 cents a kilowatt hour.
And what was SERI? What was Chugach?
Chugach, I think it's around 11 to 11.5 cents.
But that doesn't really answer my question, because the Chugach gets its power from other than just wind power. So we don't know how much more wind power is than other power, right?
Right, but there's a 2.5% surcharge on the power produced by the wind farm.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer my question. I understand that adds to it. The bottom line is, though, we know this, David. If wind power were as cheap as other forms of energy, the free market would explode with investment in wind power.
We'd have wind farms everywhere.
Exactly. So that's really all we need to know. When the government has to kick in $43 million to make something happen, then it ain't worth it. It's not.
Yeah, but it was free money.
Free money. That's right.
Taxpayer federal money is free.
Yeah.
And that happened all over the country with wind farms, and that's the only reason. And there are quite a few of them, I think, out in the bush.
Yeah.
Which are not operating today because they haven't been maintained.
Right. Wow.
And that's the earlier generation of wind farms.
Wow.
And I'd like to know what the state of Alaska kicked in.
Did they kick in?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes that's hard to find out because, a lot of these grants that these corporations get, they're hard to track, the audit.
Yeah.
Hard to track to a particular project.
Yeah. Wow.
But that's a good question to ask maybe Mr. Hawker as well.
Yeah, we're going to have him on in a little bit. So he will definitely, hopefully, fill us in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your call and appreciate your information. It's just crazy. But think about it, folks. If you're a politician or you're at a native corporation, or if you're frankly at any place and you realize that the federal government will write you a check for $43 million plus give you a 20% tax break if you invest in something that makes no sense economically for your customers. What's going to prevent you from doing it? So you look at what were these Siri people thinking? Well, they got $43 million of other people's money. If somebody said to me, Dan, I want you to come on here for 3 hours a day and talk about nothing but knitting. No. Crocheting. You have to, for 3 hours, talk about crocheting. I will give you $43 million in subsidies if you do it. Ladies and gentlemen, I would be sitting here talking about the intricacies of crocheting for 3 hours a day for the rest of my life. Now, nobody would be listening, but that really wouldn't matter, would it? That's what happens when the government doesn't trust the free market. It wastes other people's hard-earned cash. And by the way, I'm kidding. I would not talk about crocheting. I would not take that money. Life's way too short to take other people's money and waste it. 6:44, Dan Fagan, Mike Hawker's coming up. He's going to explain this whole Siri wind farm thing. And, no, I'm sorry, not the wind farm thing, the Walker taking over the utilities. Stay with us. Dan Fagan Show. .647, Dan Fagan Show. Good morning to you. Broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT. We're on 95.1 FM in Anchorage, 1080 AM in Anchorage. Also, 92.5 FM in the Valley and 1020 AM in Anchorage. So glad you're here on this somewhat warmer day. 569-1080. 569-1080. Let's go to Tom. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
How are you?
Well, I'm just fine, and I'm really interested in your subject this morning. I've been following it for years.
Good.
And one thing that you probably don't know, and Of course, I can't identify the person that told me this, but the assembly people, Anchorage Assembly,
Yes.
were kind of invited to visit Siri one at a time.
Yes.
With the idea of pressuring them into pressuring ML&P to buy the power from the Fire Island
Right.
wind farm.
I remember that.
And it's just, and they were told that it was their social responsibility
Yes.
to buy this power. And of course, it cost us taxpayers, or ratepayers, right?
Right.
And taxpayers. But it goes so much further, Dan.
Okay.
Power has been a criminal activity
Mm.
in Alaska for many years. There's 7 electrical power utilities in the rail belt.
Okay.
7. We have 300,000 people living in the rail belt, maybe 400,000 people live in the rail belt now.
Right.
And we have 7 electrical utilities. In Portland, PG&E is the power utility, and they do just fine with one set of of management.
Why do we have 7?
Because we have, Dan. We've always had it that way.
So people don't want to give up their power and consolidate and save money?
And say like Mayor Sullivan. Mayor Sullivan, when he ran for office, he promised me and a lot of other people that when he became the mayor, he was going to look into divesting Anchorage of the various businesses that we own.
Like ML&P.
ML&P, Solid Waste Services.
Gotcha.
Merrill Field,
Right.
We have 7. And he hasn't done any of that because he gets to appoint people to various positions. He has political power because we own ML&P.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. So what would be the upside of divesting the city of these 7 entities?
Well, the upside is that we pay extra dollars. And if you look at the municipal budget and you look at the CAF, or the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, City Hall back bills all of the utilities for the work that they do for these utilities. So about 10% of City Hall is billed to the ratepayers through the utilities. And it's just another way to circumvent the tax cap. But
no, that was a Mark Begich invention, wasn't it?
No, this has been going on forever.
Okay. So
I think Mark finally kind of fine-tuned it.
Yeah.
But with the 7 electrical utilities, some of the things that happen is like Chugach Electric built a new power plant over here in Minnesota.
Right.
Right. And then so ML&P had to have a new power plant.
Yeah.
And then MEA had to have a new power plant. MEA's power plant is they had enough money to build the power plant, but they didn't have enough money to build the heat recovery system for the power plant. So 40% of the power is just going through the roof.
Oh my goodness.
And then like ML&P's power plant, they contracted with an outside company to do it.
Yeah.
So all the purchasing is being done down in the Midwest.
So how would consolidating these utilities avoid all this?
Well, one, you would have a system of power delivery that didn't take into account political boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is you would have one set of management instead of 7 sets of management.
Okay.
And like ML&P, they bought a lot of land down in the Ship Creek area.
Right.
I mean, just because they can.
Wow.
And it's come to the Anchorage Assembly over the years, one parcel at a time.
Yeah.
And the Anchorage Assembly will argue that, we really don't need this.
Yes.
And Jim Posey or whoever was
Right.
in that position in the past will get up there and say, but we want it.
Head of the MLP. Jim
Yeah.
Posey.
And we want it, and we want to build our infrastructure and our footprint.
Well,
and they ask, well, how do you pay for it?
Yeah.
Well, if we have a cost, then the RCA is going to approve the ratepayers paying for that cost plus 4%. It's just the way it is.
Yeah,
I mean, we have to pay for it at the point of gun.
And when you look at ML&P salaries, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and it is unbelievable. And
so the unions are, because the unions pretty much control Chugach, right? The IBEW pretty much controls Chugach Electric.
But I don't blame them.
Yeah, they're just trying to get the most for their employees.
Yeah, they're trying to get.
But they control the board, and the board controls who runs it.
But we let them do that.
Right. The ratepayers don't pay attention to the elections, and
the mayor's office lets ML&P.
Yeah.
Remember the fight, or you weren't up here when ATU was sold?
No.
And there's Mark Begich, Bill Faulkner, Mary Froman was the three front people to prevent ATU from being sold.
Yeah.
And the first time we had a deal.
Yeah.
And it was about $400 million, if I remember right. And when we finally sold it, it was about $200 million less.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we had an extra $200 million in Anchorage?
Well,
our taxes would be a lot less.
But you got to realize, back then, $200 million was worth a lot more than it is now.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it would have been delivered to us prior to the big stock market run up.
Right.
We might not have property taxes today.
Yeah, could be. And that's one of his big black marks, that.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah.
But most people, it's 20 years later.
So
most people don't know it.
So this wind power thing, the what was it? 43 million initially. Now they spend another 15 million, and nobody wants the additional power. What do you make all this, Tom?
You and me will pay for it one day.
Yeah, eventually.
So eventually, they will figure out how to make us pay for it.
Yeah.
And it's just the way it works. But people need to know that people do know what's going on with the system, and like with the mayor's office, why didn't Dan Sullivan honor his commitments to the people that supported him for office? And it's because of politics. It's always just because of politics.
Well, next time he comes in, we'll ask him about that. That's an interesting question. Why didn't he divest the city of those utilities? Or not utilities, entities, I guess.
And if you ask him, he has very good reasons.
What's he say?
Because we have debt, nobody will buy it. Because we have, there's.
So we couldn't get fair market value for it?
And there's lots of commitments that we've made that the new owners wouldn't want to honor.
Oh, okay.
And, it just kind of goes on and on.
Was there validity to that?
You can validate anything that you say if you have enough people on your payroll. And the thing is, little guys like me who have nobody on my payroll are trying to argue against somebody that can just go out and spend $1 million on more lawyers.
Divesting the city of these 7 entities, and they are giving me MLP, Merrifield,
Services,
Solid Waste Services,
AWW,
okay,
ML&P.
Yeah, I already got that one. There's a couple more, but anyway.
Yeah, there's a couple more.
So would this be? This is not.
Well, and we have a golf course, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the city owns that, but the city owns the land. They don't actually own the operation.
They don't operate it.
Right.
But if you look last year on the bond proposition, they floated a bond to improve the golf course.
Okay.
We continually pay for the golf course, even though we don't run it.
So we put money.
We own it and we maintain it, and it costs us money.
And we own the land.
The
city owns the land. Okay. So if this is different than what you hear a lot about, like in Indianapolis, where we talk about privatization. That's like privatization is when you have snow plowers do all the snow plowing instead of city employees doing the snow plowers. That's a different thing, right?
Well, unlike our snow plowers.
Yeah.
We have our own employees plowing snow.
Right.
In Eagle River, they contract for that.
Yeah.
Their snow plowing costs 1/2 of what our snow
plowing
costs.
Here's my big question, Tom. If a mayor would get elected, divest this or, get rid of these 7 entities, privatize everything but public safety, how different would this city be? How much better run would this city be?
Oh, just exponentially. One reason is that instead of 3,000 employees, then you got 1,000 employees. And you're devoting all of your time towards the core services rather than segmenting your time between all of these different entities.
One last question. Is there anyone currently running for mayor who favors what I just described?
Amy Dembowski.
Really?
I think that what you need is somebody that doesn't owe everybody and, hasn't been part of the system for so many years that they have all these little chits that they're going to have to pay back on.
You supporting her?
I have written her a check. And I've also written Dan Coffey a check.
Who are you going to vote for?
I'm going to vote for Amy.
Are you?
I know I'm probably throwing away the vote because I don't think that she doesn't have enough name recognition to get elected this time.
Yeah. Well, you never know, Tom.
But boy, I would really look forward to the day that we have somebody like Amy that doesn't owe everybody
Yeah.
her job.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, have a good day.
Appreciate that. 569-1080. 569-1080. Let's go to Jeff. Jeff, you're on.
Yeah, Dan, I was calling in because of this marijuana initiative and how more and more people are starting to realize just exactly what they all voted for.
Yeah, Jeff, you're you're Jeff Jess, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jeff. I'm sorry. I knew you were coming up and I took your call early. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come right back to you, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to take a quick break. You are listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. All right, 7:06, Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN 95.1 FM in Anchorage, also AM 1080 in Anchorage. Out of the Valley, we're broadcasting on KVNT 95.2 FM and then 1020 AM. Streaming live on the internet, both video and audio, danfagan.us, danfagan.us. Email me, danfaganshow at icloud.com. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number if you'd like to be a part of the broadcast. I want to welcome to the show now Jeff Jesse, who is the CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust. Jeff, appreciate you calling the broadcast. How are you this morning?
Good.
I was watching your testimony a couple days ago before some Senate committee. What was the committee you were testifying in front of? You remember?
It was the State Affairs Committee.
Yeah, I thought your testimony was very compelling. Just about people not really understanding what pot is today and how it's so much stronger now, and it's just a different product that I think people think of it as those of us in our 40s and 50s, in the 70s and 80s. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you talked about in front of the committee the other day?
Well, you're right, Dan. That's one of the big differences. Back in the day, when I was in college, marijuana was maybe 5. If you had really good stuff, it was 10% THC. Now we're talking about up into 25, 30, 35% THC. And when you get into the concentrate, you're up into the 80s and 90s.
So what does that mean, practically speaking? Like a joint that someone would smoke in 1975 compared to a joint someone would smoke today?
Well, what it means is you get much more intoxicated, much more quickly. And of course, the other big development in the industry is the edibles.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a problem for people because the effects aren't as immediate as they are with smoking marijuana, and it's easy to overdose because the reaction is delayed. So you have some, you're not really feeling much, so you have some more.
Wow.
And boy, in half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, you're way more intoxicated than you may have planned on being.
Wow. I read Maureen Dowd, who's a New York Times columnist. I'm sure you're aware of her. This is about maybe a month ago or 6 weeks ago. She traveled, I think it was to Denver, and she had a marijuana brownie just to see what it was like. She said it messed her up for days.
Yeah, some people are much more sensitive to it.
Yeah.
So this is a big issue as we move into this new environment.
So what do we do, Jesse? The voters have spoken. So we've got this situation, and it's legal now. What would you like for state leaders to do when it comes to regulating and passing, putting limitations on it?
Well, I think we need to be conservative about this. One of the biggest areas that's the problem are these edibles. And there's only so much you can do with edibles to manage them. Colorado is chasing this as best they can. For example, they've set dosage limits on how much THC can be in an individual dose.
Okay.
And if a product has multiple doses, each of those doses has to be segmented, sort of like a Hershey's bar.
Okay.
So those are bare minimums, but boy, you got to do a lot more than that.
Can we, with the initiative that passed, actually outlaw edibles?
Well, that's going to be a problem in the short run. The Constitution is very clear that the legislature can only amend the proposition for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
So this session and next session, they can do amendments.
Right.
And then in 2017, they could do something a court might consider repeal.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm a recovering lawyer. You can get 10 lawyers to tell you 20 different things about what you can and can't do.
Sure.
I think a flat-out repeal of edibles, I think that's probably over the line and looks more like a repeal.
Yeah.
But boy, they certainly could take some more time to try to get this right. I don't think that's going to be considered a repeal.
Yeah. And then of course, if in 2 years, once the 2-year time lapse passes, we can do anything, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So what else? Restricting the content of the edibles. What else would you like to see?
Well, I'd like to
regulation-wise?
see some serious restrictions, if not a ban, on advertising. One of the things the sponsors of the proposition said was that they thought you could ban advertising as part of the regulatory process. So I think we got to take them up on it.
Yeah. And would you like to see, and we're talking to Jeff Jesse, CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust, would you like to see, just on a local level, like municipalities outlaw the sale or ban the sale? Can they do that under this initiative?
Yes, absolutely they can. Anchorage has already considered a proposition or ordinance to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a totally reasonable approach. In Colorado, more communities have banned it than have allowed it.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think on a local level, communities should give some serious consideration to that. The fundamental flaw in this logic is that somehow ending prohibition required the creation of a large-scale commercial recreational industry, and that's just not true. Never was, still isn't.
Have you been to Colorado? Have you studied much of what the impact of what's happened there in regards to pot, how that's impacted the state?
Yeah, we've not only looked at the data coming out of Colorado, but I was there, in fact, just a few weeks ago.
What has happened there, Jesse, that you fear may happen here? And
well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, in places like Denver, where they've allowed this and allowed it to be encouraged, there are more pot dispensaries than McDonald's and Starbucks combined.
So it's changed the landscape of the city.
Absolutely, it's changed the feel and the culture of it, and it becomes marijuana all the time. It's the big thing that's discussed all the time at public safety, public health settings in the community, neighborhoods that are dealing with having these stores and advertising come into their community. If you want to be like Las Vegas with gambling or Denver with marijuana, then a community can decide to do that. But it's something that I think communities should make a conscious choice. How much of this do they really want to have in their face all the time?
Now, the good news for us, though, here in Alaska, as opposed to Colorado, correct me if I'm wrong, is that what they did there is now written into their constitution. We can undo this here.
That's correct. Well, to a point. Of course, we have the Raven decision, which under our constitutional right of privacy gives individual Alaskans the right to possess and some marijuana in their home. So you can't infringe on that.
Yeah.
But of course,
sure.
The irony of this whole initiative is it wasn't about individual right. It was about corporate right. Because
I want to ask
really.
Unfortunately, I'm going to get to the break here, but when we come back, I want to ask you, Jeff, about how big of an industry is pot going to be in Alaska? Is it going to be like, a big industry here? And Jeff Jesse, CEO of Alaska Mental Health Trust, is here, and we'll continue with him and your phone calls, 569-1080. Dan Fagan Show. 717 Dan Fagan Show, 569-1080 is our number, 569-1080. We're going to be speaking with Representative Mike Walker in a little bit. Also, State Senator Mike Dunleavy. We're talking now with Jeff Jesse, CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust Fund. And we are talking about the pot initiative and its impact on Alaska. Jeff, I did a talk show in Redding, California for a little bit of time in the last couple of years. And Northern California is, people there tell me that I would not recognize it 5 years ago. Pot has become such a predominant part of the scene there. They grow it everywhere. They have these medical dispensaries everywhere. And really what these medical dispensaries are, typically 18 to 25-year-old men who literally just want to get high. A doctor will come into town every couple of weeks and just write prescriptions for pot. The county in which I was in had about 240,000 people. There were some 60,000 medical marijuana prescriptions written in that county. And it just changed the entire landscape of the place. Where they grow pot everywhere, they have transits come in to help harvest it, and they set up in camps and they live off of the welfare state, and then they grow, they help with the pot. It really ruined the area in many ways. Are we going to see anything like that here, like out in the valley or in South Central as a result of this initiative, do you believe?
Well, it depends on whether local communities get a handle on this or not. If you put some pretty severe limits on the number of dispensaries, if you limited advertising, if you limited the number and location, not only of dispensaries, but of growing and processing operations, I think it is possible to contain it to some degree. So a lot of it's going to depend on whether people are aware of what's going on. But I will tell you this, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We've learned this from the alcohol industry. You've got to contain it at the front end, because once people get a license and they invest in a business, even I understand why it's hard to then change the rules and somehow eliminate their investment. That's not right either.
Now, this really is going to come down to the courts, though, isn't it? Anything that the state or the cities try to do legislatively is going to be challenged in the courts, correct?
Well, I think we should expect some of that. For example, in the area of advertising, even though the proponents of the initiative said you could ban it, when they tried that in Colorado, they were sued. The magazine High Times has sued them. And understandably, they're asserting their First Amendment right and their rights under Citizens United to have commercial speech, except for, of course, false advertising. So it may be, if you lose those court cases, that there's very little you can do around advertising. That's something we'll just have to fight out in the court.
We're talking to Jeff Jesse, CEO of the Alaska Mental Health Trust. Why is this issue important to the Alaska Mental Health Trust?
Well, despite what everybody says, that the impression they give that because marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol, that somehow it's safe, that it's good for you. The fact is that it is an addictive substance. It's not as addictive as nicotine, alcohol, meth, but adolescents that start smoking heavily have about a 13-14% addiction rate.
Wow.
Adults that start smoking heavily, the addiction rate is 6 or 7%. These people, their lives start to be controlled by this substance, just like people are with many others. And that's not good for folks.
Well, I saw the other day, and this was according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, that of the 7 million Americans who are dependent on illegal drugs, 4.2 million of those are pot users.
Yeah, it is a serious health issue, and the industry wants to label everyone that wants to say, "Hey, we need to be careful about this," as we're all reefer madness guys. For example, they had a slide in their advocacy that had some guy from decades ago saying, marijuana causes homosexuality. Well, I got to tell you, I don't know anybody that thinks marijuana leads to homosexuality.
That's funny.
But I know a lot of people that have to deal with people that are addicted to marijuana, and it's negatively impacted their lives. And that's reason to be cautious about this stuff.
Do you dispute the claims of some that there are some people who suffer from certain illnesses and diseases that marijuana is their best cure, or not cure, but best way to cope with their pain?
Well, I've looked into this, and I think there is some legitimate basis for the medicinal use of some qualities of marijuana. You know, one of the ironies of how this initiative is going to play out, though, is that now the medical marijuana folks are at the mercy of the recreational market because the emphasis is going to, that's where the money is. The emphasis is going to be on high THC content, not emphasizing the elements of marijuana. They call them the CBDs that tend to have more medicinal qualities. So it's too bad because I think a focus on getting the medicinal values of marijuana enhanced could be a real value to folks with a number of conditions. So no, I think there is some legitimacy to the medical use.
We're talking to Jeff Jesse, CEO of Alaska Mental Health Trust. You know, Jeff, I can just speak for myself. I never smoked pot as a kid or a teenager. And really there was one reason. It was because my dad would have killed me. It was just, you know, for me to do anything illegal, I wasn't going to do it because of the idea of getting arrested. This has got to lead. The fact, of course, I guess it is still illegal for 18 and unders. Do we know what's happened in Colorado with the use of pot now that it's much more readily available, even though I'm assuming it's still illegal for kids? Do we know what it's done as far as increasing the use among teenagers?
Yeah, the early data does show that use is increasing among youth. The other part, again, on the edibles is also the edibles, availability of edibles gives underage users, and by the way, it's under 21.
It is okay.
Yeah, it gives them the ability to possess and use marijuana in a form that is not as easily detectable as smoking. So, you know, if a high school kid takes a vaping pen or a brownie, you know, or they even have inhalers now.
Wow.
And
like the asthma?
Yeah, they look just like your asthma.
Oh,
I have them,
goodness.
or not the marijuana ones, but just like your asthma inhaler.
Wow.
And so, you know, a kid can have one of those at school and even pass them around. And, you know, how are the school officials supposed to contain that? There really isn't anyway.
Is that what scares you the most about this whole thing, the edibles?
It really does, because I think that's what really increases the availability and, frankly, the lower perception of risk, which we know is a big factor for teenagers. Their perception of risk is what drives their behaviors. Many times, even when they think there is a risk, it doesn't contain their behavior. But the edibles are the root part of this that are really isn't containable. And ironically, despite the fact that these guys said we were going to regulate marijuana like alcohol, it's illegal in Alaska to extract the alcohol molecule from the fermenting liquid and infuse it into edibles. It's called powdered alcohol. It's illegal. But Proposition 2 is going to allow us to take THC out and put it into edibles. That's why you go into a liquor store, you don't see a bunch of alcohol-infused snack items, even though technologically that's possible.
Wow. Well, you know, it also, I'm thinking about just the idea that you could get drugged without knowing it. You go to someone's house, they're serving dessert, you think. I mean, you know, and then plus, you know, we hear about all this that's going on in bars today with women and drugging women and taking advantage of them. I wonder if that's going to be something that we're going to have to look out for.
Well, certainly there are going to be mistakes made. So they already are seeing increases in kids admitted to ERs. And of course, the industry's response is, well, the parents have to just keep this away from their kids. Well, you know, if every parent was doing everything they should do, we'd have a lot fewer problems in the community. But the fact is, unfortunately, that's not the case.
Do you think, and I know I'm asking you a question you really can't answer, but do you think that after we go through a couple of years of this stuff, that we're going to have a real appetite here in Alaska to say, man, we made a mistake with this initiative. We need to get rid of all this stuff.
Well, the problem's going to be, I think people are going to realize that this was a mistake. But as I said before, and by the way, this is exactly why the industry wanted this hurry up 9-month regulatory process, because they know what we know. If they can get their licenses and they can get their shop set up, that there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle, and the community's going to be stuck with this stuff. And that's part of their plan.
Yeah. And this is, so at this point, we've got Washington, Colorado, Alaska. Is that it as far as legalizing pot on a state? Oregon. Okay. Do you anticipate this to be a wave that will come across the country, or do you think these guinea pig states, if you will end up deterring people from actually going this route?
Well, I think that as more and more people see what happens in these states, I think they'll start to look at alternative ways of moving away from prohibition that don't involve the full-scale commercialization and industrialization. The RAND Corporation just put out a paper for Vermont that listed 12 different ways that you can move away from prohibition. And commercial recreational is just the most extreme.
Jeff, very fascinating conversation. I appreciate the work you guys are doing at the Alaska Mental Health Trust to inform us all on this, and hopefully we adopt some real common sense regulations here to prevent some of the things that have happened in Colorado. Jeff Jesse, CEO, Alaska Mental Health Trust. It's a real pleasure speaking with you, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. That's some scary stuff. Scary stuff. All right, we've got State Representative Mike Hawker coming up next. Also, Senator Mike Dunleavy. Time currently 7:29. Dan Fagan Show. 7:35 in the morning, Dan Fagan show on this Friday morning, January 30th. Glad you're here. Number 569-1080. Want to welcome now to the broadcast State Representative Mike Hawker. Representative Hawker, how are you, sir?
Dan, doing very well. Good to hear you again.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. It's been a long time, and I appreciate you calling in.
Yeah, no problem. As we start this dialogue, though, I really want to thank you for having Jeff Jesse with the Mental Health Trust on. He is a guy that really cares about the future of Alaska. He really understands the issues behind just the horrible circumstances we face across the state with substance abuse, alcoholism, and I'm really hoping the legislature listens to his counsel here.
Yeah, he's very convincing with his arguments, and I was glad he spent some time with us. Now, this is a story that, frankly, and we're talking about Governor Walker's move to have Ada purchase this Fairbanks utility, and I'm just going to have you explain it because first of all, I sent Alice Rogoff a note this morning asking her, where is this story in her paper? Because this is such a huge story. And I know Ms. Rogoff's a big fan of Mr. Walker, but I can't make sense of what Mr. Walker's doing here. Can you kind of set this up for us, sir?
Dan, you have just described exactly what's the biggest problem with this entire issue is that there are a number of data points, dots out there that need to be connected, and nobody really started connecting the dots. And when you start connecting them, it just causes me great problems as a guy who wants to think that the state of Alaska promotes the private sector rather than having government come in and take things away from the private sector.
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. Hillcorp, the folks that we brought into the Cook, we encouraged to come into the Cook Inlet, develop the gas reserves there. That, if you remember, a few years ago, we thought we were out of gas, but we were able to pass the Cook Inlet Recovery Act, get Hillcorp in here, and we've got gas again. Now, Hillcorp is looking at a market for its gas. It needs to find, places to sell it. They've got more gas than we can use, and we don't export anymore. So they negotiated an agreement to purchase the liquefaction plant at Port McKenzie and the related transportation equipment to make LNG out of Cook Inlet gas and truck it to Fairbanks, where it would be put into the Fairbanks market up there.
Right.
This private enterprise, doing what private enterprise should do, stepping out, taking a risk, and developing a project. They had to file with the Regulatory Commission of Alaska for permission to conduct this purchase because it involved, regulated activity, which is gas in the request with the Regulatory Commission to conduct this transaction. Almost immediately, on December 12th, within a month, the Attorney General tells the RCA that he will not approve this transaction until he has every bit of the financial information behind it and is not about to let it go forward.
Attorney General Craig Richards, Bill Walker's former law partner.
His former law partner,
right.
And let's call him Attorney General designee now because he has not been confirmed.
Right.
Okay. The Attorney General says, I'm stopping this transaction.
Yes.
Well, now, another month later, here we have this announcement by Ada, for whom the Attorney General is in fact the head counsel because he's AG of Alaska, Attorney General of Alaska. Ada announces that they are going to buy basically those same assets.
And just let me interrupt you for a second, just for those who don't know, most do, but Ada is a quasi-government agency. Explain what Ada is.
Yeah, and Ada is, it's called the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. It is a government agency that has been charged with helping facilitate private sector economic development in the state of Alaska.
And it is certainly a entity that has made mistakes in the past. They've had some successes, but they also, the fish plant is named one.
Exactly, Dan. Yeah. Ada has been incredibly successful when it has facilitated private sector transactions.
Yes.
Great success. But every time some politician has come along and told Ada to get in the ownership business.
Which is what's happening here.
Which is exactly what's happening here. It's failed. And go through the list.
Is that every
fish
time?
Plants, barley farms, bison herds, grain terminals.
Wow.
I like to say that the Alaska landscape is littered with the failed dreams of Alaska politicians.
And the distinction is, Representative Hawker, this is fascinating, is when they facilitate something, it's okay. But when they want to take it over, thwart the private sector, if you will, they fail every time.
I don't believe that you can point at any one of these projects that Ada has invested in over the years that has ever succeeded.
That's amazing.
Now, they also financed the road to the Red Dog Mine. That has succeeded fantastically, but it's kind of like because they own the only road to the resources.
Sure.
Yes, it's a success. But every time, government is not designed or functions well when it tries to act as the private sector. The private sector works far better. Now, the thing that is particularly offensive with this transaction is Hillcorp had a signed contract to purchase these assets. Ada has come in and said, we are going to take these assets out from under you, negotiate our own deal to purchase them, completely getting in the way of the private sector functioning.
Representative Hawker, this is so fascinating. And you're laying this out so well, but I just have to ask, why in the world is this not in the Alaska Dispatch News this morning?
I'm glad you asked Ms. Rogoff that, and I hope she gets back to you with a good answer. Is the timeline here and the conflict of interest that is being exhibited by the state of Alaska? Think about this. We have the state of Alaska in one agency saying, I want every bit of information on a private sector transaction, and we're going to stop that deal, period. You have another state agency saying, we're now going to take that deal out from under that private sector transaction, negotiate our own purchase. But this is the most self-dealing insider trading transaction that I can see. If you or I did this, Dan, in the private sector, we would go to jail because the SEC would be all over us.
Well, the press release that you and Mr. Chenault and I think Craig Johnson was involved in, and even Representative Millett, it was so strong and it laid this out so well, but yet there's no media coverage of this.
I guess all I can say on that one is, that is the will and wish of the media. I'm glad you picked this up and are having a dialogue with us, and maybe it can spark some coverage. The next thing is we're going to continue as a legislator, going to continue to look very carefully at this. And I chair what's called the Legislative Budget and Audit Committee, and I have very direct authority over reviewing the activities of the Alaska Industrial Development Export Authority.
Can you veto?
Well, frankly, we don't even know what form it's going to come into. We don't know what authority Ada or the governor even have to do this transaction. They want to spend $52 million. Where are they going to get the money? Do they have to? Are they going to put it in the budget? Are they going to need a statute to do it?
Does Ada
no one has told us.
Does Ada have $52 million that it can spend without your approval?
No state money can be spent without the legislature. But the question is, can they construe money that was already put aside for supporting the North Slope gas trucking operation? The proposal which failed miserably, which is no surprise.
Right.
Are they trying to redirect funds? So this is the investigation we have to conduct because all these questions are out there and we don't have answers yet.
Has Hillcorp spoken out publicly on this?
I think Hillcorp has to be very careful. They have a docket in front of the Regulatory Commission that needs to maintain, their discretion, discreetness about that.
Yes.
And there's also, as a legislator, we have seen vindictive state agencies go after, use the power of government to coerce the private sector. And Hillcorp is a major player in the Cook Inlet now. They've moved into the North Slope. They depend on state regulatory authority to conduct their business. And every time they want to drill an oil well, they've got to get regulatory approval or something. So I think Hillcorp needs to be very, very cautious about speaking too loudly because they could be punished by other state agencies.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen this over and over with businesses in general, that the government has such great power to destroy. Representative Hawker, can you stay one more quick segment with us?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you,
that's
sir.
No problem. I've got a press conference at 8 o'clock, but until then, I'm yours.
Great, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with State Representative Mike Hawker. All right, it's 7:47 here on the Dan Fagan Show. We're talking with State Representative Mike Hawker about this announcement with the Walker administration regarding ADA's intent to purchase a Fairbanks gas utility. This comes at the time when Hillcorp Corporation had a pretty much a deal done, a signed purchase agreement for Fairbanks Natural Gas for the Cook Inlet liquefaction facility and trucking operation. They couldn't get approval from RCA because Mr. Walker's attorney general and former law partner went to the RCA and tried to at the very least delay it or block it. Now, the question that I have for you, Mr. Hawker, is what would make the Walker administration think that having the government run this operation as opposed to the private sector, how would that be better for the people of Fairbanks?
You know, I can't speak for the governor because, again, and I wouldn't even pretend to speak for the governor. But what I can look at is the press release that ADA and basically the governor held his big press conference and meetings with legislators on that earlier this week. And it simply says that under ADA ownership, the new company will work closely with the community and utilities to reduce construction and operation costs for both natural gas distribution systems. That tells me that they're planning government subsidies that in competition with the private sector to undercut the private sector.
Right. Well, you know, we've always kind of known, haven't we, Mr. Hawker, that our current governor does tend to lean toward that owner state model, the Norway model, the government's better than the private sector mentality. Is this the beginning of an administration that is going to grow the government to the point where the government has so much more control than the private sector? Is that where this governor is heading?
This is certainly an anxiety that I share with you. If we take a look, let's talk about the biggest private sector project on deck today, and that is the development of a North Slope natural gas pipeline. The current project is envisioned to be 3/4 owned by the private sector, who have 3/4 of the gas. The state, through a quasi-private sector entity, AGDC, would own 1/4, which is equal to the amount of gas that we get off the North Slope. So essentially, but the private sector is managing the private sector. I am very worried the governor is going to continue with his promises, which were, I don't want private industry anywhere here. The state's going to do it alone and force the private sector to let us manage and market all the gas coming out of here.
We're talking to State Representative Mike Hawker about the governor's plan to use ADA to purchase a Fairbanks utility that was already lined up to be purchased by a private sector company. Mr. Walker, Mr. Hawker?
I would be Hawker, not Walker.
Yeah, I know. You're too close. Representative Hawker, are you aware of anyone within the Walker administration who potentially could financially benefit from this move?
I am not personally aware of anyone who has any personal direct financial relationships here. We've certainly seen allegations, but you say
you've seen allegations. Can you elaborate?
Yes, just throwaway lines in press comments and blogs. So I think we got to be careful about going to that extent until we have conducted a proper, a thorough, and responsible investigation. I don't really want to in any way encourage that line of thought because I personally have no evidence to see that that's a valid statement.
But there have been rumors and innuendo. But as you say, and I agree with you, unless there's some solid, substantial evidence that you could point to.
But I'll point to you at another one that I'm thinking we're worried about government trying to take over the private sector here.
Yeah.
The greatest impediment right now to a Trans-Alaska pipeline is if we were to lose access to the gas at Point Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
The governor personally has a lawsuit filed to set aside the agreements to develop Point Thompson.
Right.
He said to you personally, in response to a question during the campaign season, that he would drop that lawsuit.
Yes.
He has not dropped that lawsuit yet. And in recent conversations, I am given the impression that he has no intentions of dropping that lawsuit. And that lawsuit is exactly the thing that creates the risk and uncertainty in that pipeline, the gas pipeline project development, that will bring it to a halt.
Yeah. And if you look at his history, Representative Hawker, it's always been the Norway model. The state should own the pipeline, the 52% ownership, which is really basically the state owning it and controlling it. And his whole life has been dedicated to that year after year after year. And the only way he can do that is to blow up the Parnell deal, which many would say has gotten us closer to a pipeline than anything in state history. Would you agree with that assessment? The only way he can have it his way and the way that he's always wanted it is to blow up the Parnell deal?
And that is certainly the likely scenario, and that is exactly what would have to happen. And unfortunately, it is what I see currently playing out, and it's causing me great concern.
What could the legislature do?
Well, what we have to do is in our role, we ultimately control the purse strings. We have to, through our appropriation process, continue to fund and finance only good policy decisions that we think are the right thing for the state. We need to engage with the governor. We need to get him to engage with us and explain to us what he's doing and his vision, so we can actually have a dialogue and go forward and work for the people of Alaska. This whole business, like this Ada deal, it was done behind closed doors. Ada has never had a public hearing, never had a public meeting. It was never noticed. We got I got an email back from Ada when we asked about this that said, well, the board members talked amongst themselves and with the executive director in order to provide strategic direction. That's not a public meeting. It's not a public process.
Is that legal?
There's a good question. Under what authority did the executive director sign this purchase agreement? A bunch of secret conversations? If you or I did that, rightly so, the media should be screaming down our neck because we had no public process leading up to the decision.
Who was it that admitted the Ada board talked among themselves?
This came from their, I guess the title is their external affairs officer, who was answering our question, which was specifically about how did this thing go forward. Now,
he admitted they met in secret and talked among themselves?
Yep. Ada can report, and I'll cite the email here.
I know
we asked if there had been executive session discussions, and they said, well, they're executive discussions are confidential. Well, nonetheless, Ada can report that individual board members have separately discussed the matter amongst themselves and with Ada's executive director in order to provide strategic direction. Negotiations that led to the letter of intent were headed up by Ada's side by their board chair.
Wow.
And there is no public record whatsoever of this process being conducted.
I wonder if, people who, I don't know that people understand how the local newspaper drives news content. Most television journalists will get their lead from the newspaper. So Alice Rogoff is basically driving the narrative now. I wonder if the Walker administration calculates that in their decision-making, knowing that she basically has their back.
Again, that is great speculation for a journalist such as yourself to conduct with your listeners.
Well, you're a true statesman. You're not going to go there. I appreciate that. I do.
No, it's sincere, but I appreciate the frustration and concern that you have, and I say, as a citizen, I share the same frustration and concern.
Well,
as a legislator, my job is to do my best to get all the facts straight first. Listen to all sides, get the facts straight, and then make the best decisions possible. And right now, I and other colleagues here, we are in that phase of listening to all sides and getting our facts straight so that we can decide what route to move forward with.
Well, Representative Walker, I will tell you this. It's my opinion that it's been a long time since our legislature has played such a key role in the political landscape, because I do believe that Mr. Walker and his friends in the media are going to really try to get away with a lot of stuff. And unless the legislators like yourself and Chenault and Millette and you guys getting up there fighting and not just laying down and letting this happen, I appreciate that. And we're pulling for you guys, and I hope you keep up the fight.
And thank you, Dan. And we sincerely appreciate, knowing that you're out there yourself, presenting the objective and honest information to the public and helping us continue to, like I say, follow the pursuit of the truth here.
Great hearing from you, Representative Hawker. Thank you, sir.
Looking forward to it. Take care.
All right, goodbye. That's State Representative Mike Hawker talking about the governor, really, for all practical purposes, thwarting the private sector, purchased using ADA, state agency, to purchase a Fairbanks utility. This while the company Hillcorp was operating with a signed purchase agreement with Fairbanks Natural Gas for the cook-in liquefaction facility and trucking operation, and Walker and his Attorney General Craig Richards would rather have the state own this. And this is Norway. This is Norway. This is the owner state. This is the government is better than the private sector. This is why the left loves Mr. Walker. This is why the unity ticket is this is why people like Les Guerra and Hollis French and Nick Moe and all these guys love this administration. It is socialism at its best. And this is probably going to be the beginning of many moves on behalf of this administration, backed solely and 100% by Alex Rogoff and the Alaska Dispatch News, to have the government have much more of a stay in our state than the private sector. So hang on to your hats, folks. 7:58, the Ed Fagan Show. Well, good morning to you. 6 minutes past 8 o'clock on a Friday morning. Welcome to Friday. You made it. Congratulations. January 30th, 2014. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. You can email me, Dan Fagan, show at iCloud.com. We're streaming live, video and audio-wise, on danfagan.us. Girdwood, 21 degrees. Eagle River, 14. Anchorage, 14. Palmer, 12. Wasilla, 14. Sunny throughout the weekend. Could warm up into the mid-20s. Get into the 30s next week. Let's go down to Juneau, Alaska, where our state senator, Mike Dunleavy, is standing by. Senator Dunleavy, good to hear, or good to talk to you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Dan. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I've been watching a lot of what's been going on down there, and I heard a speech you gave on the Senate floor. It was a couple days ago, I think, regarding what's going on with the federal government and the overreach and the ANWR and the wilderness designation, and it was quite inspiring. You seem pretty fired up over what's going on right now in Washington, D.C.
Well, it's unfortunately, it's been the history of Alaska, right? There were those that did not want Alaska to become a state because they were concerned that our small population, where we were located, the climate, et cetera, our lack of infrastructure, would prohibit us from really becoming a full-fledged state that could take care of itself and not be dependent on the federal government. But what's happened is, over the years, that view is certainly, in my opinion, turned around. I mean, it appears to be a continual onslaught to not just inhibit our ability to take care of ourselves, but out and out stop it. And of course, when you do that, you're going to have a dependent state, and that's the last thing we want. I mean, we're Americans. We believe strongly that if given an opportunity, we can produce wealth, and we can have a standard of living and contribute to this country and this world. But what's been happening lately, it's just chipping away, not just pieces, but hunks of our ability to be a sovereign state.
Well, Senator Dunleavy, it seems as though that's the mentality that we're getting from the Obama administration, not just when it comes to Alaska, but to the citizens of the country. It's almost as though they would prefer people to be dependent on the government than to be free.
Yeah, and you're right, and there's this mentality that's in the mix as well. That quite honestly, individuals are incapable of making good decisions for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and since they're incapable of making good decisions, these decisions need to be made from Washington.
Yes.
Because Washington knows better. And I can't disagree with that philosophy. I strongly disagree with that philosophy. This country was built on individuals. This country was built on freedom. And I know, Dan, there's going to be people listening to this and rolling their eyes and saying, yeah, we've heard this all before. But The fact of the matter is, it's true. That's how we got to where we are today. Individual initiative and the freedom should be able to, once again, put that initiative to work. In the case of Alaska, use its raw materials to create a standard of living and create an economic base in which people can be independent and not dependent.
So this, first there was the let's increase the wilderness designation and for ANWR, and then the offshore at ANWR, and then other offshore areas they want to take off limits. If we do get a new president and we continue to have the Republicans control Congress, a lot of this that Mr. Obama is trying to do now could be undone rather easily. Is that not correct?
It could be, but here's the problem. I'm trying to be fair to President Obama. In my opinion, his philosophy is certainly an issue, but Congress has been ceding authority to the executive for some time. As I mentioned on the floor, the Antiquities Act occurred in 1906 under Teddy Roosevelt, who was a Republican.
Yeah.
And so it's not. I hate to say this, but it's not always just a party issue. It's a philosophy.
Of course, Roosevelt was a progressive, which is, he was a rhino if there ever was one.
Well, he may have been a rhino before the term was even coined. That may be true, but
right.
Congress can Congress can roll back some of these laws.
Sure.
Again, the Antiquities Act is interesting because we gave the president authority to just designate land and take it off the table through proclamation.
Right.
Merely a proclamation. So the presidency, the executive, has been vested with this power since 1906. It was amended in 43, I believe, when in Wyoming they tried to they put Jackson Hole in with the Grand Teton set aside, and then of course in 1980 it was amended even further. But obviously they haven't gone far enough. And personally, I think they need to take a hard look at the Antiquities Act, because I think that's where the president is going to try and go once he vetoes his Keystone bill, and once Congress does not approve his land grab. But it's really, we have to keep our eye on the executive, and we've got to be careful that we take back some of the power in the legislative branches of government, because they're the branches that represent the people.
Well, hopefully we get a president in 2 years who's not just a status quo guy or gal, but they're a fighter and they're willing to bring about some of these reforms you're describing.
Yeah, and I agree, and I was heartened to see that our three federal delegates, Senator Sullivan, Senator Murkowski, and Representative Young, obviously are not happy with it. And at least Murkowski's in a position to do something, so I hope they do.
And there's nothing really the legislature can do other than go on the record and say, should we sue? Should Mr. Walker sue? I mean, that really never seems to work either. I know Mr. Parnell tried that a lot. Or what can Mr. Walker, what can the legislature do?
I think we're exploring our options, right? Unfortunately, we're coming from a position of, I don't want to say a weak position, but the fact of the matter is there's been so much power accumulated in the federal government, and the idea of federalism has kind of gone by the wayside too. But I would hope we get beyond just interviews and thumping on the podium on the Senate floor. I think there's a number of us really discussing taking some action just to test the boogeyman, the specter of the federal government, quote, doing something. They're doing something anyway. Yes. They're penalizing us almost every week by these set-asides. So they're already assaulting Alaska. And before somebody says, well, dumb lady, wait a second, these are federal lands. You know, the Pebble Mine prospect was not a federal land in which the EPA weighed in.
That's right.
We just had a situation on the Kenai here a week and a half ago in which I believe it was the Park Service voted to allow subsistence nets to go into the Kenai and net king salmon. Well, king salmon, we don't have a lot of the historical king salmon runs we had on the Kenai. But, I mean, the list can go on and on and on. And so the point I'm trying to make is the federal government has no issue with continually issuing proclamations and whittling away at Alaska's ability to take care of itself. I'm suggesting, and others are too, that we just call their bluff. We go ahead and we start laying down survey markers for over the cold day.
I like it. Let's do it.
I mean, you know, and I don't want to sound like a demagogue, but
yeah,
you got to test. You got to
at some point.
Yeah,
at some point. Yeah, you got to push back and more than just words. I agree. I think that's a great idea. We're talking to State Senator Mike Dunleavy, who's down in Juneau this morning. We'll continue with Senator. Take your phone calls too. It's 8:14. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Show. 817 Dan Fagan show here on 817 Dan Fagan show here on KOAN KVNT. We're talking to State Senator Mike Dunleavy, who is down in Juneau this morning. You can watch the Super Bowl Sunday. You a football fan?
I am, and I'm rooting for Seattle.
You think they're going to win?
I think they have that. I think they're going to win.
I tend to agree with you. Their defense is incredible, but boy, Russell Wilson threw 4 interceptions in the last game. He can't be doing that, huh?
That was an exception. I mean, that guy's an excellent quarterback.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about this situation. I don't know if you followed it, and if you haven't, I understand. But yesterday it was announced that Governor Walker is going to use ADA to purchase this Fairbanks natural gas liquefaction facility and trucking operation, and there's already been a purchase agreement with Hillcorp to do this, and he's kind of stepped in place of the private sector, and now going to have the government do it. Have you been following this, and what's your reaction to it if you have?
Well, I think it's just occurred now, day before yesterday.
Yeah,
and we're trying to the devil's in the details. We're trying to figure out exactly what's going on, and you want to give the governor a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that this could turn out to be a good thing, but it's really our role to again dig into the details, and that's what we're trying to do. So at this stage of the game, really don't have any answer to it other than we have a $3.85 billion deficit.
Yeah,
and this office, at least my office, is determined to stay focused on the budget, even though we have these other things going on. But stay focused on the budget, and if any expenditure is not going to assist with this budget issue, or at least have a more than a realistic chance of producing some form of revenue or relief in some respect, it's going to be questioned. And I think all of these things need to be questioned.
Well, I agree. We should give the governor the benefit of the doubt, and he's just new now and hasn't been in office very long. But one thing that I've been watching for as I evaluate his policies is it seems to be that because of his history and because of those who he hangs out with and has surrounded himself with in office, he does seem to have this Norway model, this government better than private sector mentality about him. And it does concern me, Senator Dunleavy, that here you've got a private sector company ready to jump in and take over this utility and take over this operation, and literally had a signed agreement with this private sector company, Hillcorp, a company that is credible and it long established. And he jumps in first with his attorney general and goes to the RCA to try to block that. And then he actually jumps in with ADA and wants the state to actually buy the operation and thwart the private sector. Could this be the first of many moves on behalf of our current governor to have the state government have much more power than the private sector in Alaska? And then one last caveat to this notion of him suing the Point Thompson deal, demanding that 52% of the pipeline be owned by the state, which is really having the state own the whole thing. There's that, hey, let's go Norway's model mentality that this announcement this weekend makes me think this could be the beginning of many decisions along these lines.
I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the answer to what the governor's thinking or what's guiding his decisions on some of these issues. But I certainly share the concern that government becoming the catalyst for economic growth is somewhat oxymoronic in many respects. And it's something that I'll be keeping an eye on, because we certainly don't want to be mirroring what's happening at the federal level. I know that there are some that have been concerned that in the past there's been a monopoly by the just a handful or 2 or 3 of the large international corporations dealing with Alaska. But I think we've got to find that. I think we have to find that balance where Alaska creates an environment. The federal government needs to create an environment for all of the states to be able to have a sound economic base and flourish economically. And so the state of Alaska has to do the same. The state of Alaska cannot be viewed by investors as a place to stay away from. And I was glad to see earlier this week and late last week that the governor's people in the Senate Finance indicated that they have no desire to revisit SB 21.
Yes,
and that especially at these prices, which is nothing to cheer about.
No,
that particular bill came at an opportune time, and we're able to salvage some oil income for the purpose of government. But there's still investment occurring on the slope, and if one thing business needs, and this is what we hear loud and clear all the time, is give us some stability, whatever it is, give us some stability. And if it looks like it's a stable regime and a stable environment to invest in, we'll do it, because there's no doubt. I mean, I mentioned this on the floor. The reason Alaska was purchased by the United States from Russia was to a small extent to block off Great Britain's territorial aspirations, but also mainly for its raw materials, its minerals, its development potential. And so it's never, we haven't realized that yet to its full potential. And I would hope that the governor creates an environment for the private sector to flourish in. And I hope it's not going to be a situation where it is a socialistic Norway model in which the only thing that works is if the government has its hand in it.
Yeah. Well, we've got so much wealth up here. We're so wealthy, so much potential. If we can get Washington, D.C. to have to adopt policies that would allow us to develop our resources, not just on state lands, but on federal, my goodness, our future is bright. You agree with that?
100%. I mean, it's even more important than that. When we shut down industries here in the United States and in Alaska, they don't just disappear. They don't just happen. They go overseas.
Yes.
We strengthen our enemies. We strengthen folks that may not be friendly to the United States. We give them jobs. They get our wealth. It really is counterintuitive when you really think about it. It doesn't make any sense. Alaska has some of the most stringent environmental laws on the face of the earth. So fine, you shut down the oil industry. Where's it going to go? Right. The deltas in Nigeria, Russia, places where they don't have any environmental laws. And so for those, and I hope they're listening, for those folks that consider themselves environmentalists and even preservationists, if you really care about the environment, you want development to happen in Alaska because it's going to happen here under strict guidelines.
Yes.
If you really care about the planet, you really don't want this stuff going overseas.
It's such a great point. You know who Dennis Kucinich is, the congressman who's pretty far left. When he was running for president, 6-8 years ago, I had him on my talk show. He called in, and I asked him about that. I said, if we don't develop ANWR, we're going to have to get oil somewhere, and somewhere like Nigeria or somewhere where they don't care if they spill it over the ground. And he honestly could not answer that question. He did not have an answer for it.
That's amazing because, Dan, wealth is created.
Yes.
It's created. You don't steal it from somebody else. You can only do that for so long, and then you run out of money.
That's right.
And again, Americans, we work harder than any other nation on the face of the earth. Individuals in America, we put in the hours, and we'll take risks, and we'll do what it takes to turn a buck. And as a result of that, I mean, we have a fantastic standard of living. People are literally by the millions coming to this country because they know it is a beacon of hope. And this is not the same country that you and I were born into. Yes. It's changed radically, and in many respects, not for the better. And I hope we get enough folks in Congress, and I hope we have the courage here in Alaska to try and turn things around.
Well, Senator Dunleavy, you keep up the good fight. We appreciate you giving us some of your time this morning. And next time you're in Anchorage, stop by the studio. We'd love to have you here in with us.
I'll do that, Dan. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Senator. It's Senator Mike Dunleavy down there in Juneau this morning. And always glad to hear from him. He's one of the guys who really understands that it's about freedom. It's about the private sector. It's about the free market. It's not about government, and we appreciate him joining us this morning. Our number, 569-1080, 569-1080. That's how you can get in touch with us. I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email this weekend, danfaganshow@icloud.com. That's the number or the email address that I am reachable at, danfaganshow@icloud.com. It's going to be a beautiful weekend as far as sunshine. Lots of sunshine out there. I wouldn't break out the swimming trunks, though. It's not going to be that warm. It'll be in the mid-teens to lower 20s for highs. currently at 16 in Anchorage, 12 in Wasilla, 14 in Palmer, 9 in Eagle River, and 21 in Girdwood. 569-1080, 569-1080. Let's go to Sam. Sam, you're on.
Yeah, good morning. I had to take issue with Senator Dunleavy's comment that you can't create wealth by stealing it from others. The monarchies of Europe did fairly well by stealing it from others, although they didn't last, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah, but they didn't create it. The word there he uses create. You could get wealth by stealing it, but you can't create it.
Yeah, I agree. And in a republic, that doesn't work. But I wanted to ask you about the legislation that's coming up on the putting the pregnancy tests in the bathrooms of the bars. What's your comment? You got any thoughts on that? Think that's money well spent?
And this is government money?
Oh yeah, it's a state funded project.
And the purpose is what? What's the purpose behind it?
To create awareness that, hey, you're pregnant, maybe you shouldn't drink.
So are there people on the planet who don't know that?
Well, obviously, FAS is a huge issue, of course.
So there are women out there who don't think that drinking lowers your inhibition and that could lead to sex and that could lead to pregnancy?
Well, it's not the drinking and getting pregnant, it's the drinking while pregnant causes the So that, somebody that's in there drinking in a bar goes in there into the bathroom and sees a pregnancy test and goes, oh, yeah, that's right, I'm pregnant, maybe I shouldn't be drinking. I just think it's not money well spent.
Well, it's crazy. Why not just put up a sign, don't drink when you're pregnant?
Yeah, exactly.
Aren't signs cheaper than pregnancy?
$500,000 program that's requiring now more funding.
Goodness. Oh, my goodness. Well, here's the thing, and I think you'd agree with me on this, Sam. The people who are doing this, they mean well, but they just don't understand how life works, and they don't understand that this is not their money to waste,
Yeah, they got too much money, I guess.
Yeah.
Too much money that they stole from us.
Yeah, there you go.
So, okay.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. Yeah.
Appreciate your call. Well, let me just say, for those of you out there who are women and you're not aware that getting wasted and drunk when you're pregnant is bad for your child, let me be the first to let you know that it is. 8:30, Dan Fagan Show. 8:35 in the morning. Good morning to you. Welcome, Dan Fagan Show on a Friday. How about that Friday? You made it. Congratulations. Hope you have a big weekend planned and got lots of fun stuff to do. It's going to be a little chilly, but sunny. 569-1080. Our good friend Mike Daniels and his team at Country Financial, they're so well equipped over there to guide you and direct you and educate you on how to go and head right toward a stress-free, worry-free retirement. Country Financial, Mike Daniels and his team of representatives, their whole life dedicated to educating people on matters of finance, matters of whether you're adequately insured. You know, you think about it, you play by the rules, you work hard, you accumulate your wealth. And if you don't have enough insurance or the right kind of insurance, literally you could lose everything within an instant. So that's one thing they can help you with, but there's so many other things they'll help you with as far as where to invest, how to invest long term. Make sure that when you get to your retirement years, when you want to enjoy your life and not have to work, and you're in a situation where you're no longer bringing in money, Mike Daniels and his team, they can help you with that. And so many Alaskans have benefited from going to go visit the folks at Country Financial. They have 13 locations, 5 in Anchorage, 5 here in Anchorage, 5 in the Valley. Give them a call to make an appointment, 866-COUNTRY. 866-COUNTRY. That's the number. Story today, and I don't know. Oh, bless her heart. Old Alice Rogoff. You know, she's publisher over at the Daily News. She's a billionaire. She's got a lot of money. And she really is. She really thinks our governor, Bill Walker, swell, as do I. I think he's a good man. I like him. I like him personally. My concern with Mr. Walker is that he is he's part of the backbone crowd. He's a disciple of Malcolm Roberts and these guys who think the government's better than the private sector. The government should be in the boardroom of the oil companies. And my fear with Mr. Walker is that this is huge, ladies and gentlemen. The Fairbanks utility, Fairbanks Natural Gas, has instructed Ada to purchase and the rights to build a cooking player in the private sector. They had a signed purchase agreement with Fairbanks Natural Gas for the cooking and liquefaction plant and its trucking operation. Mr. Walker take over the operation. Legislators on the Republican side are saying, "Whoa, what's this all about? Why is the each met secretly in private among themselves, not in public?" Now, we're talking to Representative Mike Hawker earlier, and he pointed out that every time Ada has owned anything, it's been a disaster. Great elevators, seafood plant, you go on forever and ever. Now, when Ada facilitated something, it worked fine. But when this is what Mr. Walker's all about. The owner state, the government drives things, not the private sector. The Norway model. And they always talk about Norway. Oh, they've got a $350 billion permanent fund. but they also have $350 billion in debt. So their net worth is pretty much zero. And if that's what we got with this new governor, and apparently by the people that he has surrounded himself with, that's what you would think, then that's a real problem. Because the private sector creates wealth, the government sector redistributes. And don't for a second doubt that Mr. Walker's sincere in preferring the government sector over the private sector. I don't doubt that for a moment. I'm not questioning his integrity. I'm not in any way accusing him of doing anything untoward. But I believe that that's the philosophy we got when we elected Mr. Walker as governor. And this takeover by Ada of the Fairbanks utility, even though the private sector had a signed purchase agreement, is evidence A, exhibit A. And it's concerning. Now, here's the thing that's just amazing to me. This is a huge move. Alice Rogoff, publisher of the ADN.com and strong, supportive ally of our current governor, did not have this story in her paper this morning, despite the fact that the House majority yesterday, early afternoon, issued a press release, very strongly worded, questioning this Walker decision. Nowhere is it to be found in the ADN.com. Now, Dermot Cole, who should be on the Walker payroll, I'm not saying he is, and I'm not saying he's a bad person and he's writing for cash. I'm not saying that, but he's so favorable toward this governor that he should be getting paid from the Walker administration. I'm sure when he does eventually tackle this, it will be in glowing terms. I sent a note to Miss Rogoff this morning. I've been trying to get in touch with her for months. She won't return anything, calls, emails. I sent her a Facebook thing because she hasn't unfriended me yet. So I figure maybe, here's what I said. I said, hey, Alice, hope you don't mind me contacting you on Facebook. I will stop if it bothers you. Did you read the unusually strong press release issued by the House majority early yesterday afternoon? It questioned the governor's gas utility purchase. It seems like a huge story to me with a lot of unanswered questions. With all due respect, I was wondering why it was not covered in your paper. And she has yet to respond to me. Tom Myers writes on my Facebook page, Dan, you're funny. Billionaires don't have to answer to you. Hey, billionaires are not, non-billionaires are people too. I'm not saying she has to answer to me. I'm just curious. I'm just writing her I'm just wanting to know why is that not in the paper? How could you have the state literally step in at the last minute, kill a private sector deal, and then the state says, oh, no, we'll do it. I mean, it's unheard of. Are you kidding me? They had a signed agreement, Hillcorp did. And the state jumps in and says, no, we'll do it. We'll take it over. Are you serious? And that's not in the paper? How much can you possibly... flex before him when you walk in? And slanted cut. Just because of your boy? My goodness. 569-1080. Dan Fagan Show, 8:44 in the morning. All right, 847, Dan Fagan Show. 1080, 569 1080. I'm going to give you my Super Bowl pick in a minute. I do this every year that I have a show. And I've got a pretty good record going. I've missed it a couple of times, but I'm not going to tell you who I think is going to win, but I'm going to give you the exact score. That's coming up. 569 1080, 569 1080. If you want to call in, you want to give us your prediction on the Super Bowl or what you think is going to happen and who you think is going to win. Love to hear from you. 569 1080, 569 1080. There's a story out of Huffington Post, and this is some crazy, wild, and wacky stuff, as Dana Carvey impersonating Johnny Carson used to say. Apparently, and I don't understand, I don't see this anywhere except for the Huffington Post. And the Huffington Post, obviously, I mean, I think that they've got good journalists there, but they lean way, way left, and I don't know how that would relate to football. But anyway, here's the deal. NFL didn't log the PSI of each Patriots football. This was reported yesterday. No one's picked this up. What was the precise PSI of each of the 12 footballs the Patriots offense used in the AFC Championship game? We'll probably never know. The head of officiating, confirmed that the NFL did not log the exact PSI. They simply approved them or disapproved them. In other words, although the Patriots did play with underinflated balls, the NFL hasn't kept detailed records of whether those footballs were slightly underinflated, which could be the result of temperature, which is not true. It wasn't cold enough to change that's not true. So that's wrong. Or significantly underinflated, which would indicate that someone purposely let the air out of the balls. The NFL will apply a low standard of proof to Deflategate, which means that the NFL doesn't necessarily need airtight case to conclude the Patriots broke the rules. I wonder, the journalists are so freaking lazy these days. What I'd like to know here is, what's the procedure? Do they normally take the measurement, write it down in a log? They don't tell us here. Because if that's normal procedure, or if they just pick them up and kind of feel them, and they go, well, this is okay. And then, at the halftime, they felt them and, whoa, these are all underinflated. This is it's deflated or inflated properly, and the PSI measurement is not taken. Record of anything that was written down. And frankly, if that's the case, if it's not standard operating procedure to write down the PSI membership measurement every time, then I think that the NFL owes Mr. Brady and Mr. Robert Kraft a pretty big apology. Because how is he going to determine? Well, it felt different at half. How do you determine feeling? Is it the same guy that felt the balls at halftime? It sounds funny saying this. I mean, I don't know. Jimmy Kimmel, a bunch of folks were defending Tom Brady. Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Of course, they're all New Englanders. So you got to figure they're going to jump in there. And so my prediction on the Super Bowl, I've always been a big believer in this phrase, defense wins championships. I remember it was the Baltimore Ravens playing year had allowed I knew that I knew that I knew that the Ravens would win, because when you're that good of a defense, and they did, they won big. Now, the reason I bring that up is because there's some similarities between this game on Sunday and that game, in that Seattle's they're just really good. They are really, really good. The Legion of Boom. They're just so good. You can't really even put words on how good they are. They're so intimidating. They get over the quarterback. And Tom Brady, Tom Brady is not one thing about the quarterback for the playing the Green Bay Packers. The quarterback for the Packers, he is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the game, as far as just moving an inch this way, a foot that way to avoid the rush. He's so good in that regard. That's not really Tom Brady's strength. Tom Brady, quarterback for the Patriots, he's a pocket passer. He's not a scrambler. He's not mobile. He's not fast. He's slow. And so if the Seahawks can get to him, which they've been able to get to most people that they played, even quarterback of the Packers, I think that could be a real factor. And if you can get to Tom Brady and throw him off his game, that'll be the difference. Now you look at Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seahawks. He threw 4 interceptions last week. They played horrible against the Packers. I mean, just absolutely horrible. And Aaron Rodgers, had a really good game, quarterback for the Packers. Yeah. And so if Russell Wilson gets out there and throws interceptions and plays badly, then that'll be the big difference, I think, in the game for the Seahawks. My prediction, I believe that the Patriots will get to Tom Brady. I think the Seahawks will get to Tom Brady, but I think that Tom Brady has such a quick release that he'll be able to get rid of the ball. He's Mr. Calm. He's Mr. Cool. He's an amazing quarterback. And Russell Wilson, I still am not a believer in him. He can scramble, yes. He can run for 25, 30, 40 yards at a time. But his passing ability is suspect, as evidenced by last week. And he's not had that good of a year. You had Russell Wilson, and then the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, what's his name? Big, tall guy out of Nevada. How can I? And Russell Wilson both had breakout years a couple years ago. They're very mobile, both throwers and passers. Both of them have gone down considerably in their quarterback rating in the last couple of years because the NFL has figured them out. Defensive coordinators have figured out how to contain Kaepernick and how to contain Russell Wilson, diminishing their ability to do what they did in their breakout years. So for that reason, I think Russell Wilson will have an awful game, have multiple interceptions, and I think the Patriots, frankly, will win handily. Now, I'm saying this, and we are recording this, so I'm going out on a limb here. But I believe the prediction for Sunday, New England, 34, Seattle, 10. And I know you Seahawk fans are throwing stuff at your radio and you're cursing me. 34-10, New England. I don't think Seattle is as good as people think. They've got a great defense, but Tom Brady is probably one of the top 3 best quarterbacks in the league. Bill Belichick, probably the best coach ever to coach, even though he allegedly cheats. 34-10, Seattle does not repeat, and it will not be an exciting game, which I hate because I love exciting Super Bowls. They're rare. Most of them are blowouts, and I think this one will be a blowout also. 34-10. You heard it here first. If I'm right, if I am correct, we will replay this clip on Monday. If I'm wrong, you will never hear it again. Hope you got a good Super Bowl party to go to. Most people are typically congregate. I love Super Bowl parties. They're always good for food and eats. What I don't like is when 95% of the people there don't know the first thing about football. I'd like to have a 40 to 60 split. 60% know about football, 40 don't. Dominated by fans. I've been to parties where it's me and another guy who understands the game. I would prefer the more people at my Super Bowl party know something about the sport. That's my preference. Everybody to each their own. Well, we wrapped up another week here at the Dan Fagan Radio Show. We're here Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 o'clock every morning. We're having a great time. I cannot tell you how much I'm enjoying doing this broadcast. I cannot tell you how honored I am to have the opportunity to come into your car, your home, your wherever you are. When you listen to this show, it means so much to me. It's such a privilege. And I'm such a fortunate man to be able to have this opportunity. And it means so much. And I'm so glad that you are listening. I hope that you tell your friends and your family and your neighbors about our broadcast. We're on danfagan.us and, of course, KLAN, KVNT. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday, 6 a.m.